I'm Ryan Gifford, and this is Gifford Fabrication. Today we're going to be looking at my media blasting and powder coating center that I built on this rolling trolley to make it compact and portable. It's a pretty simple setup. It has three major parts, and we'll go over each one, see how they all fit together. So this is just a little tour of the overall assembly. Fairly standard Craigslist oven, and it gives me about 21 inches of width to play with for larger parts. I did like the face-mounted controls that made this project work. A little bit of storage underneath here, some barbecue gloves. This is a little stool that I use to put the vacuum on. You'll see that later. Extra filter, and those are some brackets for putting pieces on to spray and then coat. On this side there's a bunch of storage. This is a box fan, a pop-up spray tent, some other parts and pieces that I use, and then a pull-out drawer with a bunch of samples that I made so my wife can pick the colors that she likes with the information on the back so I know how to reorder it, as well as a bunch of extra thick tin foil that I use to mask stuff off. Always keep a little spray mask around, as it is dusty. Infrared thermometer is absolutely essential for making sure that you have reached your temperature points on the part. This is the actual dual voltage control for the Eastwood sprayer. And then I have some storage in here, just miscellaneous stuff. Small set of dikes for cutting wire. Those are silicone plugs. Extra spray heads for the media blaster, and then stainless steel aircraft wire, as well as special high temp masking tape. This is the electrical and air manifolds. We'll talk more about those later. I also have some racks that I keep on it. For small parts, this rack is great. It's for silverware, and I can put the parts in there, pick them up while I'm media blasting them and spray them off. And then some cooling racks. These are all held in place with just command strips. Those little hooks, they work great. This is the back side. Some storage back there, some other brackets. These are large polyester casters. They make the whole system roll around on a concrete floor. So this is the Eastwood benchtop media blaster. I've been really happy with it. It's fairly easy to use. It has a top opening door, which I think is really nice. Certainly makes it easy to load and unload parts. I've added some stuff to it to make it a little bit more functional. Really, probably the biggest thing I added is a little bit of dust separation, dust collection, if you will. And specifically, I threw a dust deputy, a small one, on top of a lid. And then I have two buckets that nest inside of each other. This one's got a bucket head, small wet dry vac, and this one's my collector. So I put the dust deputy on top of this and connect the whole system together to draft up the media after it gets broken up. It stores nicely in here. It's a fairly simple fit, and when I'm using it, I actually mount it off to the side, and then on the back, there's an attachment here. It actually ties into this section down here and then runs down below, and that allows the media that's broken up to basically be passed, the dust to be passed through here and collected. And it actually collects quite a bit of dust. I was surprised at how much dust there was. You don't necessarily notice it when you're using the media blaster until you turn it off. You turn it off and you can see nothing through that screen. So it does make a difference, and anybody who's done any media blasting can tell you that visibility is a tough part of that, right? Not being able to see it. And I think that's really helped. I did put a blast gate on it because, as I had read and found out, sometimes too much draw will cause problems. I don't know if it's a back pressure thing or exactly what it is, but having this blast gate on there seems to help. And if things get kind of wonky inside visibility wise, I either open or shut the blast gate a little bit, and it actually does seem to help. So not entirely sure that I understand the physics behind it, but that's what it is. So there's some other parts on the back of this, particularly storage. So this is my grounding cable, which is just from big box store, and I put some clamps on it right here that I drove a grounding rod outside the shop, and so I just hooked this onto the part, or onto the stand that I'm coating on, and then run it out to the grounding rod and make sure that the area around the grounding rod is damp, and it really does help with grounding out. You can certainly ground out to the chassis of the machine itself, or you can ground out through the neutral in your power supply. I've read different things about that, and I guess the short version is this was an easy way to do it. I stretched it right out the door and it's done. I have had better results using a dedicated grounding cable for my work than I have using the grounding through like the power supply. So your mileage may vary with that one. There's also a 220 and a 110 connection. These two tie into auxiliary outlets over by my compressor. And basically what I've done is I've run everything into here. So another part off the rear of this machine is this dump right here. And it may not be real easy to see, but it's basically just a formed sheet metal dump. And what it aligns with, if I remove some of these parts and pieces, is there's a trough built in right here into the top of the cabinet. And what that trough does is it lines up with the media dump that's on the bottom of the machine, the conical portion, or the sloped portion of the machine. So when I change media, it becomes just taking out that large nut and bolt assembly that anchors the hole closed, and all the media dumps into the trough. And then I use this hook right here that I hang my connections on to hang a small bucket on it, and the media dumps out the trough and is easily recoverable. So whether you're using it for media recovery, to pull media out and either sift it or do something like that, or more likely to remove media to change to a different grit, having a way to remove that media easily is a big time saver, because otherwise you end up taking the top of this apart and scooping everything out and then trying to get underneath it. It is a downside to these benchtop model media blasters that it's not real easy to change media on them. So it's just one of those things you have to be aware of. So another thing I did on this build up to make it kind of more inclusive is I built both a air manifold and an electrical manifold, if you will. This is a 110 outlet that's wired to this specific 110 cord. So when it's plugged in, it powers this job box or this outlet box. And then I just have duplexed plugs in there. And then what I did is I put in individual switches to control the individual parts and pieces, and I labeled most of them. So when I plug in my different pieces to this whole system, I have individual control, whether that's for the powder coating gun itself, or it's for the fan, or it's for the light that is inside the media blaster. I have individual controls, and the whole thing is obviously then plugged into a receptacle, which makes it fairly easy to have all the parts and pieces work together. The manifold, the air manifold here, is a little bit more difficult to see, but basically what I did was I ran in a pressure adjuster knob, and then ran a T out of this and ran 2 lines out, and I have gauges at both of my points, and I've labeled them for the pressures that I want. They're not the same pressure. When you're media blasting, you need about 80 psi on this machine, but when you're spraying powder, you only want about 8. So I left the media blaster on the high side unregulated, and I regulate that from the back. And then I have another regulation knob down here, if you can see it, where this little whip plugs in, that allows me to control the pressure for spraying powder. And you know, they'll tell you that powder should be sprayed at a specific pressure. I find that variable, and I'm not sure. It probably has to do with how the powder has settled out. I definitely get a better reaction with this powder coating, this Eastwood powder coating machine. If I agitate the bottle a little bit as I'm spraying, I think it kind of lifts it up and gets it spraying through, moving through the machine a little bit better. But I know that too much pressure will not work. Too much pressure blows the powder off, and you just don't get that good adhesion, that good smooth layer that you're looking for. Too little is probably better than too much. So for what it's worth, that's what I do. This is a little whip, a little 3-foot whip that I just built out of some old tubing, and it does double duty. It's set up right now for cleaning, so I can plug it into the air port down here that I use for spraying and dial the pressure up, and then I have a just a little spray tip that I can use to spray stuff out. And when the entire spray booth is set up, that's how I clean. Is I basically let the filter, the fan and the filter run and spray everything up, kind of agitate it up and get it into the filter. But if I disconnect this and throw it off to the side, now by simply connecting into my air chuck, I tie this directly into my gun on the bottom of the filter, and now the gun is ready to spray. And so I'll show you how I set up the spray booth and what that looks like. Okay, so as far as setting up the spray tent, the spray side of this, I've moved the machine around a little bit so you can kind of get a better view of it. I built this fold-up table that's held in place by a bungee, and it's got drop-down legs that lock into place, and it gives you this extension table off the side, which is where I put the spray tent. So I'm gonna work a little bit in front of the camera, which is not great for you guys, but to help set it up and let you see how quickly it really does go up. So I have a spray tent, set the spray tent up. Spray tent sits off the back just slightly. And then one of the things that this view is not going to be great for is showing exactly how the fan sets up. But I have a filter, which has seen better days. The filter just is held in place by bungee cords or bungee straps inside. I do find it important to line up the filter with the edges of the cutout. If it's askew, you'll tend to bleed powder off the side. So this fan, this is just a regular 20-inch box fan, and what I do is I set it up to basically blow out, right, to draft, and it just sits on the back of this spray tent, and there are two more bungees back here that I loop over the top. And now the fan's in place. The whole thing sits here, and the weight of the fan actually acts to kind of anchor everything in place. And I'll go back in here and check my alignment for all my for the filter, and then kind of align it front to back. And that fan plugs back into that electrical manifold that I built, so I have an easy on, easy off type kind of setup. I did build a spray, basically a spray platform, and all this is it's one of the inserts, one of the racks from the oven, and I built some legs, and I'll show you kind of why these legs are the way they are in a bit, and then screwed them down just using some cap head screws and pinched basically some pieces in place. So this sits pretty nicely inside, and I can hang pieces off of it using stainless steel suspension wire. I put some tinfoil across it just to kind of deal with the excess, the overspray a little bit. One of the things you run into with this is that grounding directly to that, using that green grounding cable and grounding directly to the platform, because it's metal, the grounding will travel through those stainless hooks, the stainless hangers. I got a couple back here someplace. They're different. These, I just use some little S hooks sometimes, depending. But if this is all, if the rack is all coated in powder and baked on, you lose that electrical connection, that grounding connection. So by leaving some tinfoil on there, I can peel the tinfoil off and replace it, and it really helps with the overall grounding of the system. The other thing I did is I built a rack, a traveler, if you will, and I have a Lazy Susan insert right here, and I can place that down, place my little traveler on it, and the edges of this traveler are actually small angle iron. So I can set this down, and then the feet on the support piece are angle iron as well, and they line up. So if I line them up like that and then move this around, now I have a Lazy Susan that I can spin all the way around if I want to. And the nice thing about that is that when you have a bunch of parts hung on there, and this is actually a fairly poor example because I don't think everything's quite lined up, but you don't necessarily want your parts banging into each other, because once you spray them, any contact with the powder is going to cause that the powder to fall off or to be damaged, and it may not flow out properly. You may get nooks and crannies or little cut marks in it. So the nice thing about powder coating is that you can literally just knock it all off with compressed air and start over, but who wants to do that? So this little Lazy Susan setup is pretty nice. I also use it with, I copied a stand for doing like Yeti mugs, like coffee mugs. You might have seen it in the back where it's adjustable up and down. It's just a piece of thread stock with a base. Well, I can put that base on here and turn that piece as well, which is really important for doing mugs because you got to get all the way around it. Small parts is a little bit easier, but that's how I set this up. So that's what this would look like all set up, and then the spray gun basically just comes right down to here, and you spray out your parts and pieces, and then from there I can pick this up and go basically directly into the oven. And this just slides right in here. And those feet are suspended off the bottom so the pieces can hang and nothing's in the way. I really like this little spray shelter. It's super easy to set up, and despite what some people will tell you, it's super easy to break down. I literally just fold it in half, grab the top and kind of one corner, and you twist it together, and it, okay, well, we'll try that again. So we fold it in half, grab opposite corners, twist it together, and then just fold it over itself. Ha! It only took 2 tries. That's not so bad. And then it's got its own little storage bag, which is nice. But it really does a great job at containing, especially powder. I know that you can paint in them as well. I've not done that, so I can't attest to that. I have a bigger spray shelter that I use when I do larger painting projects outside, and it's basically the same material. It is covered in paint, which is kind of what you'd expect from that, but it tends to work exactly how it's supposed to. So I hope you enjoyed this overview. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and as always, get out there and make something.